Welcome to the First Time Facilitator podcast. Whether you're a first-time facilitator or a seasoned pro, listen in for tips and tricks to make a bigger impact at the next workshop you deliver. And now, your host, she's the middle child, Leanne Hughes.
Hello and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Leanne Hughes, and I'm here to help you create unpredictable workshop experiences that predictably work. If you're a returning listener, thank you so much for joining us this week. And of course, if you're new to the show, I welcome you with open arms. It's awesome to have you here, focusing on building your facilitation and training skills as well as, and we also throw in some life skills from time to time too. Now, last week on the show, we had Jan Keck, who was talking about deep conversations, how we hold the space for our participants, and how we also create engagement on our virtual sessions as well. Now, well and truly, when it comes to running our workshops, what we're really doing is hosting an event. And today's guest has an event background, and you can really tell when she describes what she does to make her workshops, virtual or in person, amazing. We continue the conversation around virtual engagement. It is still one of the number one questions that's posted on the flip chart every week. And my guest collaborated on some wonderful summits last year that were virtual, which we'll share in this episode. We also dive into creating marketing assets that are built as part of your conference or workshop to drive word-of-mouth marketing for your business. My guest is Suzi Dafnis, and she is the CEO of HerBusiness. That's a collaborative online community of women who are growing and scaling a business. Suzi's big passion is helping women business owners to create the impact, the income, and the results they want through their business and to do the work that they love every day. For over 25 years, HerBusiness has provided mentoring and training to help women grow a sustainable business. And she has grown multiple multi-million-dollar businesses, which are online, offline, product-based, and service businesses. So you're in for a real treat today. She's passionate about learning and knowledge and loves sourcing the best education, mentors, and resources from around the globe to help her business network members get the information, skills, knowledge, and support they need to succeed. I'm overjoyed when I read that in her bio because Suzi is also a member of our Flipchart Facebook group, and she contributes and shares and learns from all of you as well. So that is the awesome part of any type of group conversation, is that you brainstorm and inspire others as well. And on that note, thanks to Flipcharter Ken Bergen, who introduced Suzi and I. And we videoed this conversation, so please check it out on YouTube. I'll pop a link to that in the show notes because you should see the amazing setup she has. It looks like we were talking in person because her camera was so great. You can learn more about Suzi at herbusiness.com. I'll pop a link to everything that she does in the show notes for this one, as well as a link to the Flipchart Facebook group in the show notes over at firsttimefacilitator.com/episode 157. You're in for a treat. We're talking about the level of detail it takes when you plan a workshop. And we also talk a little bit about voice control and how you can use that to create engagement. Please reach out to Suzi if you found this helpful. DM me on Instagram at Leanne Hughes, or find me on Clubhouse at Leanne Hughes if you'd like to continue the conversation as well. Enjoy the show. I am so excited to welcome onto the First Time Facilitator podcast today, Suzi Dafnis. Suzi, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
I'm so excited to be here. I am really looking forward to our conversation.
You have a really diverse skill set. You do a lot of different things, so not just pure facilitation, but marketing, podcast, production. You've got a massive community. So how would you describe what you do for listeners, and also how did you discover the work that you do now?
My official role right now is the CEO of HerBusiness, which is an online community of women business owners all over Australia, New Zealand, and increasingly other parts of the world. And we help women to go from perhaps being a solopreneur with all the responsibility on their shoulders and feeling overwhelmed and underpaid and all those things to creating a sustainable business, whether that is them on their own or whether they want to build a team. And we do that through online training, through in-person training when we can do that, through our mastermind program, and through a ton of free resources like our podcasts, our blog, and a number of free webinars that we run throughout the year.
Yeah, I love that. Like you do so many different things. And I was very attracted to your podcast. So one of the flip charters, you're in the flip chart group as well. Actually, I had a friend reach out and she's like, oh my goodness, Suzi Dafnis is in your Facebook group. It was like, it was pretty funny. So she's obviously.
I love the group. It's really, really helpful. I've picked up a lot of tips while I've been there. And of course, anything I can contribute. It's a great community. So congratulations.
Oh, thank you. And that's how I discovered, yeah, your awesome podcast. And when you talk about solopreneurs, like that's me. I've been out of corporate for a couple of years. So I definitely understand that whole plight of doing everything on your own and having things on your shoulders and then hopefully scaling to something where you can kind of remove yourself. You know, that's the dream, right?
It's totally possible, Leanne. I'm letting you know.
But also, well, I think that the episode that really attracted me to your show was your virtual conference, but also listening to your podcast. You've been doing online training for over a decade. So that's also interesting. It's kind of like everything that you've done in your past has positioned you for this year. Like there's no better
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I'd love to talk about that.
Yeah, let's talk about your virtual conference first, because you've had it's an incredible in-person event. I've heard the event, when it has been run in person, is just a lot of attention to detail. People feel celebrated. So how have you created that level of engagement through the virtual world?
We have been doing online programs since 2006. We did our very first webinar. And then we started to do a series of webinars and people would write and say, where do I park? I don't know where to go. And it's like, okay, this is so new. So we have done thousands of webinars. And so a lot of online training, online courses, all sorts of different formats. And so when this year, everyone suddenly had to pivot from doing in-person events. And I had an events company for 13 years. So I've worked with a lot of trainers, facilitators who would schlep our bags, right, to different cities to do events, who now suddenly their careers, their businesses had fallen into a hole because they didn't have a way to do what they did and get the same fees and reach the same audiences as online. So we've been doing a lot this year to help speakers and facilitators to take their work online. So one of the things that we do is we do an annual conference and we invite women from all over Australia to come together to network and hear from world-class speakers. And so we had an event scheduled for June and then we pushed it out because we thought, this COVID thing will be done by October. And then as it got closer, it became apparent that this COVID thing was not going to be done. In the meantime, we have a high-level marketing mastermind program for women as well. We had already tested doing 2 full days on Zoom very successfully, with people getting even more than they would out of a person-to-person event. So we were pretty confident that a few things. We knew how to put together a curriculum. We knew how to engage people because we'd been doing it for the longest time. And we knew we just needed to figure out the technology beyond this, right, what you're seeing here. It's like, how else can we do this? So we actually hired a production crew. Not that this is essential, but for me, it really helped to have a couple of different sets because, again, that broke up the day. And it wasn't just them seeing me and my desk the whole day long. And so we put on a conference. There were 350 women from all over Australia and people, we literally had nobody leave from the morning to the evening, stuck on their computers, listening to world-class speakers, doing breakout sessions, doing sharing, breaking up into pods, coming back, working through a workbook. There's lots of fun things that we did to do that, but it was such a feather in our cap to know that, like you said, we'd been training for a long time to do this, but there were some things we still had to consider because this was mums had to pick kids up from school, people who were going to be sitting in front of a computer and not accessing their emails and not talking to their clients that day. So we had to think really carefully about how would we make that experience amazing. And so it was a long time in the planning, Leanne. So it wasn't just what we did on the day. It was all the work that we did ahead of time to prepare them for that day. And there was a few things that we did very strategically to get them excited, 1, to show up and 2, to be there.
I think one of the things that I loved is the attention to detail and the amount of planning that you had prior. Because one of the things you did, you talked about goodie bags, so actual sending out physical items, and then what you did through the day was like, all right, unwrap the next element.
Right. So we sent them out an event pack. So it was a big box and it was on brand. It had, our tagline on it. It had our logo on it. They had my team could have killed me because inside it were individually wrapped little items, all with codes on them so that we knew what was in each item so that when it came time to open things, we could direct them to it. So all these gifts individually wrapped, but also very thoughtfully chosen. I'll tell you some of the things that we did in a moment. But they got this box, but they got strict instructions to not open it. All they had to do was post a photo with a hashtag, let us know that it was there. We had tracking on all of them because they were very valuable. And then when the day started, as you said, throughout the day, they got to open different things. And the different things, what I like with event packs, because none of us needs another other branded pen or mug or notebook, really. Now, having said that, in that particular kit, we did have a mug and we did have a notebook, but they were high-end, expensive, not branded around us, branded around the essence of the day, which was doing what you love every day. And so these have taken pride and place in people's offices because they reinforce the theme of the day. But we also had some things that we opened throughout the day. So one of our presenters did a session called Toot Your Own Horn, and it was about defying the imposter syndrome and the resistance and speaking up and sharing your wins. So we had a little tooting horn in there that they opened up at that time. They had snacks. So we armed them with morning and afternoon tea, sent ahead of time so they didn't have to worry about that. We even sent them a wrapped bottle of Prosecco for our after-hour drinks. And I'm trying to think of some other things. But, we did another one of our virtual events. The theme, we were doing it all about video. So we sent them a selfie light that they could attach to their screen. We have sent them stationery and planners because we were doing a session on planning. So it's not a matter of just giving people a box of landfill, that they're just going to literally, and I've received these when I've signed up for conference, they're going to walk over to the bin and just tip it upside down and say, thank you very much. What a waste of money and resources. It's really about being thoughtful and thinking, how can I use this for engagement? One of the other things that came with the instructions inside the kit was, here is our hashtag for the event. Go ahead and use it because there's going to be prizes. And so throughout the day, we had a wheel, which is actually an idea I got from inside of your group. But we had went and bought a physical wheel, and I had one of my team come and we'd spin the wheel and someone would get a prize. And this is all just, it seems kind of inane because we're dealing with adults, but it just was a way to break up the day and keep people on their toes and excited about what was happening. But more than anything, when we do these events, all those little things are great, but ultimately we have to have a curriculum that works. We need to be exceptional facilitators in that we understand the adult learner, we understand the different ways people learn, and we understand that we can't just do what we normally did on stage by speaking into a microphone and a video.
Everything that you talk about is all really based around that curriculum. And so I guess what I'm thinking about is often I'll have an idea for a workshop, and then leading up to it, I'll play around with it. And even sometimes the day before, I tell people not to do this on my podcast, but I'm still adjusting things. But what you're forced to do if you do this type of work is locking something down and going all in. I actually really I talk about it a lot, then what you actually call an event or call a workshop. So Toot Your Own Horn. You've actually got to spend a lot of time marketing your own workshop and naming. Right. Naming is a really key element as part of that. As you're talking, Suzi, I'm thinking of a conversation I had with Alan Weiss, the $1 Million consultant.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he was saying everything he does is marketing. Even when he's delivering, he's
everything
marketing.
We all do is marketing.
And I'm just everything you're doing, the hashtags, everything is it's viral. People will talk about it and share it. Yeah. Is that a really, in terms of your business and the way that you built it, was that a key element, just incorporating that word of mouth and making things shareable?
It was definitely, because that event was primarily for our members, and some of our members, because we're a membership-based organization, they could bring guests. But what we wanted to do was make sure that, one, we had some assets that we could use to market next year's event. Two, that those who decided not to attend this year got a sense of how amazing it was, and hopefully they're now going to earmark it for next year. And so it was all done strategically for the now and for what happens later. I remember hearing a story actually about Prince, the musician, who's now since passed, and he was talking about a concert he was at, and he was on the stage and he had the audience participate in, he was saying something and they were repeating it back, he was saying something and they were repeating it back, to the point where he actually even left the stage and the audience was still in sync doing what it was he asked them. And then it turned out that he had done that strategically, not just to engage that moment, but because they were recording that session and he wanted that piece for the video recording. So we want to be thinking strategically with everything that we are doing, because we're creating artifacts every time we do it. And so if we can create the artifacts beyond just, because that's the thing with events. I had an events business for 13 years and we ran events in Australia, New Zealand, and in the US, and they evaporate, right? Once you're done, you're done. So what is the artifact that's going to be left over when you get off that stage or that virtual stage?
What is the artifact? Yeah, because a lot of the time I think, oh, great, we'll just take a photo at the end of this workshop, and it's cool, but what else could we have done? And I guess some of the value of even having Zoom calls is when people say something and you've recorded it, it's an excellent sort of asset you've got,
right.
testimonial. Yeah.
One more thing with Zoom, when you're setting up your settings, if you're recording to the cloud, you can actually choose to record both speaker mode and gallery mode, which means that later, if you're wanting to do a promotional video, you have some interesting cuts that you can go between. Often people will choose to record one or the other, but we always record both because then it allows someone to produce something that's a little more dynamic and interesting when it comes to doing a sizzle reel.
Yeah, all those sort of scene changes and contrasts rather than, I actually, when I first, in March, I was like only gallery view, and then like, oh, hang on, thank you for calling that out as a step. Question for you is when you've, because when I hear spending a whole day in front of Zoom, or I know you had a production studio, so maybe you were up and talking in front of cameras. You're not getting that reinforcement with that energy of, I mean, you might be. I've seen Tony Robbins, like he's been high-fiving all of his.
Yes, isn't that fantastic? Yeah.
Yes, that's great.
I love
What about
it.
you? And like thinking about, right, I actually now have to make the switch as well, and I've got to bring the energy to this 2-day workshop where no one is around. Like, how do you prepare yourself?
I love this question because, there's no feedback. It's not like you're on stage and people are engaging. So there's a couple of things. One is we did actually lay out, and so if you've got a big group, different computers and iPads and things with the gallery view, so I could actually see people, I could see their faces. So that felt like I was in a room with other people. But again, there's no audio feedback because of course they're all muted. So now and then we'd open up the lines for a minute and ask them to cheer or ask them to say something, and so you could get that little bit of feedback. But we gave them ways to engage. So we gave them some shortcuts. Firstly, video cameras on, right? So that was a given. So if you're going to be in this class, video camera is on. Microphone is off unless you're, being asked to speak. And so they could actually see each other. We also showed them, hey, this is gallery view, this is speaker view. This is how you reduce the size of the slides and see more people, or you can increase the number of slides because there's bullet points that are worth doing. So giving them a little bit of this is how to get around Zoom, but also showing them things like in the participants, breakout box, whatever that is, here's how you do a hands up, a thumbs up, using the reactions and letting them know how to do that. We also armed them with reaction cards.
Oh, I love that.
We created a few different reactions. There was applause, there was great idea, there was a couple of other things that we introduced the language, and so they understood what they were. And then people would just, on their own account, go ahead and do that. Or we said, if you're going to applaud, doing this doesn't show up the same way as doing this. And of course, if you're listening to the podcast, what I'm doing is moving my hands right up close to the camera as opposed to having them close to my lap where I might normally clap, because it's a different sort of medium. And now I've totally forgotten your question. Oh, yeah, it was about engaging with them. Plus also calling people out. So, saying, okay, so who would like to answer this? Here's a question. Go ahead and put it in the chat. And then I would call people out. Hey, Mary, I see that. Or we did a live Q&A in one of them where I actually had someone interview me asking audience questions, or occasionally we'd open up a line and let that person speak. So all those things are best when, like you said, they're premeditated, you've thought about it beforehand, you have your system down, and you have the logistical support should you need it in order to make those things happen seamlessly. So we would send them on a break, we would turn music on, so it was just like what we do in our real life events. So someone was, responsible for making sure that when that slide progresses, that next one's got music, and that's what's taking them to the break, and then that's staying on during the break, and then it's transitioning to the call-in song or the callback song or whatever you did. So it took a lot of pre-planning.
Yeah, I just love the attention to detail that you talk about. I did this episode, I was like, I think it was like 12, it was a 3-part series of 12 rules for facilitation. And one of the rules was never underestimate the importance of catering.
Yes.
Yeah, because it's just, and people sort of laugh at that, but I think it's key. As facilitators, we think, it's all about the content and the way that I deliver, but what you bring with your event experience is that whole wraparound of the experience, which can absolutely impact the room setup, the lighting, all of that. How much do you stack? I mean, there's a real advantage for you.
It's so important. So important. So, so this office, we've moved into here just a few months ago. Yeah. And so this was done specifically because I go live on Facebook a number of times a week. It had to look pretty. The flowers swap out every week. And similarly, anytime, your lighting, your sound, when people are like this over the camera and they're really badly lit, or they're coming to you and they're in their tracky decks or whatever, I mean, that all speaks. It doesn't matter that you're at home working. It's bringing that level level of professionalism. The other thing is, if you can get like the best quality camera that you can get, the best microphone, and things have changed so much, Leanne, because like I said, I've been doing this for a long time, but if I have a fetish for anything, it's microphones and headsets and things, because I use them all the time. And so I'm always getting the new thing. But these days you don't have to spend a whole lot of money, because most electronic stores have a pretty good quality of whatever it is. And, your backdrop could be a set of books laid out in color code, or it could be a very simple, banner that you put up, or a TV screen that has your logo on it, or something like that. But it's being thoughtful about those things. And speaking of catering, I had an event business for 13 years, which I sold now over 10 years ago. And we would bring out speakers from all over the world, and we would spend so much money on the whole thing. And people would be spending a lot of money, and yet they would be talking about the quality of the food. Yeah. And you always want to take care of people, whether it is virtual or not. It's like the conferences which give you some, a big drum of coffee and that's it, like fend for yourself. You are really doing yourself a disservice, in my experience, because even if you charge people that little bit more, but give that little more, in my experience, it always comes back tenfold, because you're representing your brand. Like you said, we're always marketing, and the quality of the stuff that shows up in your event pack, the quality of what your backdrop looks like, the quality of the sound. And when we are doing virtual events, people need to be able to hear us. And, we have to they need to be able to see us, and paying a little bit of attention to that. I mean, that's just, for me, it's just professionalism. But again, because I've been in events for so long, that level of excellence really matters to me and to my team.
Yeah. High five. I absolutely agree with you. And not only that, so, I mean, you've got great sound, your background's great. I think that the thing that impresses me most is your ability to engage on video, your level of energy, Suzi. Like, it's, you just come onto this call, you like have all this excitement, enthusiasm. So you really, I think you lead with that energy. Has that always been a way that you operate? Like, how do you maintain your energy?
I'm not always at this level, but when the camera's on, when the microphone's on, it's showtime, right? You are now on stage. And so because people, I can't see, I mean, I can see you and I can hear you, but someone else might be watching and they can see me, but I'm not necessarily paying attention to them. Communication is only a small percentage of the words. A lot of it, as you know, is the energy we bring. So when it's showtime, and I'm on and I'm there and I'm present for the people. And I'm actually an introvert. So when I come off stage, whether it's a virtual stage or a real stage, I need to recalibrate. And I need a little bit of quiet time. But the energy I bring is going to dictate the response there. Now, it doesn't mean you have to be a fruitcake, and be unnaturally on a high. And you don't want to be on a high the whole time either. It's like if I were you, and not you, but someone listening, and perhaps you don't know how to control your voice, so that sometimes it's soft, sometimes it's loud, sometimes it's excited, but sometimes it's more serious. Then understanding voice control is part of that engagement. And it becomes even more important when we're doing things like this. Knowing how to pace, knowing when to make a point, knowing when to pause effectively, and knowing when to speed it up and move things along. So that is, again, honing your craft.
With your voice, did you do any sort of voice coaching, or just teach yourself or reflect on what you were saying? Because you've got a great voice.
Thank you.
Moderate that is very
well, I think part of it is I'm lucky that I've got a strong voice, and that's just something that's come hereditary. However, when I first started podcasting many, many years ago, about that time, my partner PJ had actually bought me some singing lessons as a Christmas gift by a wonderful woman named Anne-Marie Wilshire. She's got a business called Vibrant Voices. And so I went along and I was practicing, I think it was Madonna's version of Fever or something. And I'm like, why am I even doing this? It's not like I'm going to go singing, but it was a fun Christmas gift and I loved it. And I said to her, hey, Anne-Marie, you know what would really help? I'm starting podcasting, and I feel like, if anything, if you could help me so that I stay engaging as I'm speaking on my podcast, that would be far more valuable to me than learning how to sing Fever, the Madonna version. And so in just a few lessons, she just really got me clear on just noticing what my voice was doing, but also just staying very centered and very present and speaking to one person. So sometimes I hear people speak and they're yelling into the microphone, like so everyone has to hear them. And the truth is, the microphone is your friend. The microphone is right there. You don't need to yell if you've got a good quality microphone. You don't need to project your voice to the back of the room, because you are already projecting to the back of the room. And so that's just a little trick. And I've often found myself hearing other presenters and sending a note to their personal assistant saying, tell them to hang off, because they're not going to have a voice by the end of the day. quit yelling. And quick yelling into the microphone. You don't need to do that. But for me, it is something that I do pay attention to. And because I do podcasts, I have to obviously protect my voice, but also it's just practice and getting a little coaching. And right, it's like any skill we want to advance on, there's people who are experts at that who can help us with that.
Yeah, actually, good point about the people that talk to everyone and on a stream. I think I remember when I joined a global company a few years ago, we were on the video conference and I felt like I was yelling to Indonesia. I was like,
you were going across the water.
I was like, why am I so exhausted? Yeah, just shouting out. Also, in terms of language, like I know when I started my podcast, I was like, hey, everyone, welcome to the show. It's like, but I'm not talking to everyone. I'm talking to, and you, Suzi, you use the word you all the time. I'm talking to you. And even in workshops, like, hey, everyone, but it's you're presenting, people are listening to you. It's a one-to-one for them, even though I still find it really interesting. You're presenting to a group, but you're still speaking to an individual.
Yes.
And language becomes really important then as well.
Yeah, that's a really, really great point. And it can be easy to trip and because we think, oh, my listeners, I'm listening, or people who are viewing.
Yeah.
But right now there's just one person at a time, hearing us speak or watching us. And I think that's you'll just build intimacy with that person if they don't feel like you're not really speaking to them.
Yeah, it's very subtle. So, Suzi, part of my podcast is I love to talk about facilitation, but the other part is I love talking about building businesses because I left corporate 2 years ago and I'm starting my own thing and sort of just sharing my journey as I progress through, stumble and fall, hopefully not too much, but also have a few wins. When you work with women or just people that are trying to move from corporate to starting their own business, like what are some things that you're noticing now in terms of building profile? Like what's most important? Is it outreach and trying to find people? Is it content? Is it like there's so much to do? Where do you sort of help your community members?
I love this question. And what I do every single day is help women build a business that gives them the income and the impact and the results that they want. And I pretty much start at the same place every time. And that is, you need a couple of things. You need to know who your ideal client is. And often we can be very broad in who we think our customer is. And when we try and be all things to everyone, we end up being nothing to nobody. So if you're a facilitator, if you're a trainer, and I was just giving a member feedback about this morning, you want to be very clear. So if you're saying, I help teams to become more effective, what sort of teams, what size teams, in what industries, at what level? Is it C-level? Is it junior managers? Is it frontline staff? And just getting very clear who your ideal client is. And that includes, if you're pitching to be a speaker, like exactly what sort of organizations, because the more you can become known for the person, if you look at your industry and you look at who is well known, they likely have a very clear target market. And so for anyone growing a business, get very clear who you're for and who you're not for. One of my favorite marketing mentors, Seth Godin, always said, you want to be able to say, I made this for you, but not for you. And so often we try and say, here it is, come buy my stuff. And I remember him telling a story about an accounting firm in New York that specialized in working with bakeries who did over $5 million in revenue. Now you'd think that's a very small niche. How are they going to make any money? But no, they're very profitable because if you're a bakery and you're doing over $5 million, then you want to go to the person who understands the tax laws and the financial strategies and how those businesses work. And so the same advice applies if you're a solopreneur, and that is, who is your ideal client? And then what is it that you sell? And so often we can start by creating products and services and then trying to find a market. And the thing is, we need to do it the other way. We need to identify our ideal client, get really intimate with our ideal client by knowing what their pain points are, what keeps them up at night worrying, what their challenges are. And then we create a products and services based on that. Then we already have a market for our product and service. So who your ideal client is, what it is you sell, and then having a very clear way on how you sell what you sell, and not, again, being having too many bright, shiny objects. So what is your main pathway, right? Is it free to free trial to thing? Is it free download to webinar to sell? Is it free information session to, is it breakfast with HR teams who might hire you? What is your strategy? And just going deeper on a few things than trying to do a lot of things. So they're kind of the three core things, but any business, whether you're a solopreneur and it's just you and maybe you outsource a few things, or you have some virtual staff, or whether you have a small team of people, or whether you have a team of people and you're growing to a big team, there's some some fundamental areas of business that every single business has to have working for them. And they are we call them the HerBusiness growth zones. And these are things that we've mentored to and coached to for over 25 years. And that's things like planning and systems and technology and reliable sales and marketing and money and people and even you, right, and your mindset, because the mindset of a solopreneur is so different to that of someone who's growing and scaling a large business. And because we can't focus on everything all the time, we tend to start with sales and marketing, which is fine. But the moment these things start working, you realize that you need systems and you need to look at your technology. And then there's money. Oh, and who's going to sort that out? So I could talk forever because this is my passionate subject. And but you want to start by knowing who you serve.
That's awesome. I actually love that set the golden line. The second part of that is not for you. That's the key, because I think, and even making that choice is hard. It's funny because I also am still trying to figure out who it is, because you want to help everyone, and if you like different things, it's tricky to do that. But it's so everyone is telling me that it's okay, Leanne, making right shiny object syndrome. Absolutely, I hear that.
It's hard because we think we're cutting off our money line, and you would like to do a lot of things. And for many years, as my business, as long as you called yourself a businesswoman, we were for you. Whether you were in corporate, whether you had an idea for a business, whether you worked for a not-for-profit, right? Whether you wanted to get on a board. But the moment that we got very clear that we are for women who have a business, they've likely had a business at least 6 months and they're looking to grow, but they're stuck, our whole business opened up. And we continue to get tighter and tighter on that definition of who our ideal client is. But the broader we stay, we actually want to go, a friend of mine says, she's an American, she's Canadian actually, says an inch wide and a mile deep. So getting very narrow and then really going for that market is far more fruitful than trying to be all things to all people. Yeah. And again, every week I'm reviewing members' positioning statements, and it's the same thing over and over again. It's like you're trying to be too many things, or you really don't understand what the pain point of your client is. And so if you don't, interview a few of them. Find out what it is, why they're attracted to you, why they might need a service. And the moment that we do that, Leanne, and we get their language, our marketing is done.
Yes.
Because we're using their language, not our marketing blah, blah, to talk about what it is that they want.
The marketing blah, blah. It's hilarious. Because I did when COVID hit, I was like, what do people want? And so I just went on a listening tour. I just put it to my email list, book in a 20-minute time, and I'm just going to listen. And that was it. It was really fun. But even one subtle thing, and I've shared it on a couple of episodes, was I kept talking about creating engaging workshop experiences. Mm-hmm. But the word that kept coming back to me was non-boring.
Oh, right.
That whole running away from the painful, non-boring experience rather than to the engaging experience. And so I did a webinar, and it was creating a non-boring experience. And
it flew, right?
Test. And that one just went through the roof. Just from listening, actually.
Because you were using the actual language. That is so powerful.
Yeah. And even the word, because the podcast is called First Time Facilitator, but the word facilitator can be, many different things. So I'm also thinking, is it accessible to the people that I want it to be accessible to? So absolutely love the idea of listening in. Now, Suzi, you talk a lot about your membership, and I was a member of Stu McLaren's Tribes experience this year, and your membership is used in every example.
It's
he's and Suzi in Australia is doing this, and so it's pretty amazing what you've built and how you've created an engaged community. And I think it's a real. Seth also talks about communities and tribes. So if we're looking at facilitation and creating group experiences where the group is actually the ones that are spurring it on, what have you discovered that works, that has kept your membership going all these years?
I love customer stories, and I love to get members involved in our membership. So our membership is called the HerBusiness Network, and it's a pay by the month or pay annually kind of membership. And there's a whole lot of things that are included and bonuses and all that sort of thing. And what happens when women join is we firstly establish where they are now and determine where they want to be. And then we give them access to the relevant, because we've been around a long time, so we have a library full of trainings and lots of downloads and all those things, but it can be so overwhelming. Yeah. And so we really need to think, and are still not perfect at this, we still have a way to go, thinking about that client experience and giving people access to what they need just when they need it. But what we found, again, because we know our customer is one of the main things they want, is to know that they have a place of like-minded people to reach out to and ask questions of. So we give them lots of opportunities to do that. We do 2 events a month where they get opportunities to brainstorm things that are happening in their business. But they're not just throwing spaghetti at a wall. They are asking other women who are likely doing those same things. They're doing a lead magnet. They're launching a membership. They're doing an online course. They're having a Black Friday sale. So it's not a random people asking random questions, right? Yeah. And the other thing is they get away from isolation because they feel like they're part of something. And even though they're working on their own and are small business owners, it can be really lonely, even though we're connected with social media, because we don't have a sounding board for our ideas. So we create ways for them to be connected, whether it's through the facilitated events that we do every month or through our accountability groups or through our shared experiences inside the Facebook group where we do engagement posts that ask people to share of themselves, whether we do our monthly challenges that we do, whether that's a sales and marketing challenge or a systems challenge. So we just build in ways for members to get involved. Now, do all members get involved with everything? Absolutely not. But enough do for us to have a wonderful, wonderful retention rate. And, I'm just very proud of what we deliver and the results that our women get.
Yeah, because that's what it's really about. And you talk about the transformation piece, which is critical. It keeps someone sticking around. And I even think of my experience being involved in, I've signed up for different memberships and how, sometimes you're like, I'm really into it. And then other months, like life just takes over and you sort of tap out. So it's nice that you can sort of dip in and weave in and access resources when you need to. You mentioned your Facebook group and that you do a lot of Facebook Lives. And I'm just curious, in the 10 minutes leading up to a Facebook Live, like what are you doing? Are you like, I don't know, doing your power pose? Are you?
I love it. Oh, we haven't been very good friends, Facebook Lives and I. I remember doing my very first Facebook Live and I had some friends, actually a couple of members of your group, and we were at my place and we were having a peer-to-peer sort of accountability meeting. And I said, I won't swear, Facebook Lives. And one of my friends said, let's do one now. I'm like, absolutely not. We are not doing one right now. We'll just do it into a private group. It'll be fine. And so she put up the camera and we just goofed around and it was done. And I'm like, okay, I don't like it. I don't feel like I'm in control. Like I don't have my notes and it's not, it's all live happening right now. Yeah. And so for the longest time, it was just such a barrier. Just to get live every week was such a barrier. So I had to hack my behavior and had to create programs that make me show up. Even though it's so much easier to show up, hacking my behavior really worked. And part of that was setting up a Monday morning interview with one of my members that was pre-scheduled, confirmed. They answer a bunch of questions that inform the interview and how it's going to go. And so Monday morning, typically at 11 a.m., I'm going live on our Facebook page. And that happens every single week, except for public holidays and except after big promotions, blah, blah. But that's a consistent one. Going live to my inner circle, that's easy. For me, going live to the general public, don't know me from Adam, is a little bit harder. But it's become easier. And part of it is having a system, hacking my own behavior, bringing other people on, because I love interviewing, just like you must do, because you do it on your podcast. That makes it easier. But also just pre-planning just some key bullet points or sticking to my knitting with what is my core content and looking at that same core content 25 different ways. And sometimes it's the simplest things that can get traction, as you know, than the ones that we overthink. And so Facebook Live has been very powerful. The most powerful thing about it, Leanne, has been that you can retarget people with ads. Once they view your Facebook Live, you can show ads to anyone who has engaged, whether they viewed 3 seconds or 5 seconds or the whole thing, it doesn't matter. You can retarget them. So it becomes very powerful from that perspective. But for me, it's about consistency and going into a new year as we're recording right now. For me, it's about being even more consistent, not just publicly, but, we have a free group as well. And sometimes I'm in there, sometimes I'm not. And it's about being more consistent with Facebook Live because, like I said, because just the ability to retarget people who watch your lives on your page is hugely powerful.
Yeah, I didn't even know that you could do that. And you nailed it with consistency because usually I'll only go live in the flip chart. Like I'm out running, like, I really should do something. I haven't really given them much love, so I'll just jump on and do something. And so then as a result, I may be live maybe once every couple of months because how quickly time goes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I love that idea of just going, right, I'm going to dedicate some time to it. I think it's just a great way of building any type of skill. I remember when I wanted to get more confident on Instagram stories, all I did was for 30 days in a row, like I'm going to record a video in the moment and just post it every single day for 30 days.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, now it's not a thing anymore because
Really? Did you keep it up after the 30 days?
No, but anytime I feel to share something that it's not I'm happy just
it's
to
not
share
a big
wherever
deal.
I am.
Yeah,
I don't need to get all done up, and you know what I mean. I'm just like, let's just do it in the moment, and I just figured out ways, angles, and how to speak.
Oh, good for you. I did 30 days of Facebook Lives. I think it was in September, but then as soon as the 30 days were over, I was like, I'm not doing one of these for a while. But but it breaks the back of it, like you said. And so it doesn't become this huge beast that you have to overcome every time.
Exactly. And you just you find content every day because you have to, you're looking for content.
Right, exactly. And the thing with that content, and I was talking to a friend about this morning, is that becomes valuable content. That can then become a podcast episode, it become a blog post, it can become a series of social posts. So we don't have to create different things from different media. We can create one thing a week that's really juicy, and then we can package and parcel it in so many different ways. And that way it becomes less overwhelming. And I'm saying that to myself as well, because I can sometimes think, oh, what am I going to say? And I'm like, well, you've got these great trainings that you've just done. Do them as a podcast, or take that and do that as a Facebook Live.
Yes.
So for instance, this week's my Facebook Live did become my podcast.
Yes.
And did become our community email. So yay me.
Well, actually, I love that. I did that. I repurposed a Facebook Live with the flip chart for a podcast. I loved it because sometimes when I do a solo episode, I'll pause it and then I'll go back. But you don't have that option on a Facebook Live. You just got to keep going. And then the stuff that comes out of your mouth, it's I wouldn't have even thought of that if it wasn't live. Or the interaction from your group is spurring other ideas. It's that whole co-creation process. It's awesome.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. So do you have any advice would be for people that are wanting to start workshops and get into the facilitation game? Do you have any sort of tips for them, people that want to get more comfortable in running events?
In running events, I think like anything you said, it's a skill that can be developed. And we think it's about our content. And quite often it's really not about our content, because we can create the best online course, the best workshop. But if we don't know how to market it, if we don't know who the ideal client is for that, we can't get the word out, then we've almost wasted that opportunity. And I too often see people build things and hope people will come, and they don't. And so I just encourage you to define your ideal audience and start to build a community of them. Like Leanne, you've built this wonderful community of facilitators. And so you are hopefully warming us up for something you're going to offer us, right?
I'll listen to this again.
But ideally, you're always building an audience of the ideal clients so that when you do have something to offer, you can offer it. So you want to be doing that in tandem with developing your great new keynote, or that great new webinar, or that great new presentation that hopefully you'll be able to give in person very, very shortly at a, city near you. But I don't know that I've got anything overly other than to say content is part of it, but understanding how to run the business of being a facilitator and a speaker is almost as important, if not important. Because if you can't do that part of it, then get someone who can, right? So that you can be your best every single day, but also make the most of this opportunity. Because I've seen too many speakers, personal experience working with speakers for many years, who get way into their late years and are still schlepping around because they haven't figured out how to leverage themselves. And they're speaking not so much because of the love of speaking, but because they need to keep speaking, because they haven't handled the other side of it, which is creating a business of it, or finding some things that can be automated, or embracing online and being able to sell their talks or their workshops day in, day out, 24/7. Right. And so I know a lot of people whose businesses went from X dollars to zero this year because you weren't ready. And so even though it looks like COVID is freeing up and things will be better in the new year, I encourage you to not let go of this idea that you want to have another stream of revenue, which is more automated, that doesn't require you to be on foot with a suitcase in a hotel room somewhere. I remember in 2002, I had an events business. I wasn't even doing the speaking in those days. And I spent over 200 nights in hotel rooms in 1 year. And so, over 300, excuse me. It was over 300 nights in hotel rooms. And I just burnt myself out. And that's not everybody's situation. I recognize that. And like I said, I wasn't even the speaker. But I prefer to be able to do those things at choice.
Agree.
And having more than one revenue stream allows us to do that.
I love that. Thank you. And because I same interview with Alan Weiss, I said, I've been busy delivering. I don't have time for marketing. And he's like, well, your business model's wrong. I was like, oh. But it's true. It's absolutely true. And you've actually got to create that space. And it's as a solopreneur, you want to say yes to everything, but you got to create that
absolutely
to create those assets. So it's wonderful, the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
If anyone would like to find out more about, your membership, your podcast, all of that, where should we send them?
The best place is probably herbusinessnetwork.com. Our membership is closed. We only open up 3 or 4 times a year. But if you go to herbusinessnetwork.com, there is an opportunity to request an invitation. And then the next time the doors open, you'll be the first to be invited.
Awesome. All right, we'll put that in the show notes as well as all of the other stuff that you do, your Facebook group. Suzi, it's been delightful talking to you. I'd absolutely love your energy, the work that you do, the message that you're sharing. I think it's very aspirational. So thank you for being you and for being on the show today for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, thanks so much for sticking around. You've reached the end of another episode of the First Time Facilitator podcast. Connect with the show at firsttimefacilitator.com. or follow me on Instagram at Leanne Hughes to find out what I'm up to during the week. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to share it with someone who will also appreciate the insight, and make it easier for yourself and subscribe to the show in your podcast player of choice. Thank you so much for listening, and chat to you next week.